Hey there! I want to talk today about the concept of blooming. So, I just had a really transformational paradigm shift of a conversation with a mentor of mine, and in all transparency, I always felt like blooming was like some peak you get to, like a culmination moment. Because when you think of a flower bloom, you think of, the seed and then the stem and then the bud and then it opens and it blooms and the beauty is exposed to the world. And I've just had this thought that it's not that people stop and smell the buds. They don't stop and take a moment and look at the bud. They only observe and appreciate the bloom. And I think with so many of us, we feel like we are climbing to a point of culmination. There. We want to get there in life. We want to do that thing that's going to make us feel like we achieved our goals. We're there. We've arrived. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't know if we ever feel like we've arrived in life. I feel like, specifically for me at least, I'm always striving for more. I want to do better. I want to do more. I want to accomplish more for the Lord. And so sometimes I can feel as though I am blinded to the blooming. And I don't see the ways in which I'm blooming, that the Lord has me blooming in the moment, until I look back on a season of my life. And then I'm like, oh my word, I did that with the Lord's help. And I bloomed and I blossomed and flourished in that season. But in the moment, I didn't feel like I was blooming. I felt like I was trailblazing or learning by trial and error, when in reality, we are blooming in those moments because we are walking by faith, not by sight. And that's how God wants us to operate in this earth. Is He's a faith God. He doesn't give us steps 1 through 101. He gives us step 1, and we obey that first step. And we're faithful with that first step. And then in His timetable, He gives us step 2. And then we obey that. And I get it. I'm the same way as you. We like to have the whole plan laid out. We like to know steps 1 through 101. Have the whole blueprint, the game plan. Oh yeah, I get it. Any fellow planners out there? But since we are called to walk by faith and not by sight, that unfortunately is not how our lives play out. Because oftentimes I think we would trust ourselves instead of trusting God. So our lives unfold in a way that it's step by step. And my mentor gave me a thought to ponder on, and she said, is it possible that you can bloom and then become more dormant again, and then bloom again? And she reminded me of some bushes that have flowers on them, and it made me think of the bushes in our backyard, where it's a bush that blooms with these beautiful fuchsia and hot pink flowers, and then they fall off. And then a few months later, they bloom again. And it's like, oh yeah, God uses nature to speak to us as well. And it's not that we reach this pinnacle in our lives where we're blooming as the person God made us to be, and that's it, and we stay there forever. We can sometimes go back into that dormant season. I do believe that, where He's then working in us, working on our hearts to then bloom in that next season. So that bloom can look different in different seasons of your life. I truly do believe that. And I just want us to all work on being more aware that we are blooming in the middle of the season when we're blooming, because hindsight is 20/20, and we often only look back and see the work that God did in us when we're looking back, but we don't see it as we're living it. And I just wanted to give you this thought today, because it really did make me sit and think that we're not just working towards and striving towards that one moment where we feel like we've arrived. Blooming is a journey, and It can feel like we're thriving in certain times of our lives, and then our bloom falls off, and then we bloom again. And it doesn't mean that we fail. It just means that God sometimes has us go in ebbs and flows in life. And then another thought that she presented to me that I want to share with you is that in greenhouses, they do what's called a forced bloom for plants, where they culminate the perfect environment, the perfect temperature, the perfect soil, whatever it is, for that plant to produce fruit or for it to bloom. Everything's perfect conditions. And obviously I want that in my life. If I knew how to put myself in the perfect situation, right time, right people, right place, doing the right thing, if I had perfect knowledge of the perfect game plan, trust me, I would execute it fully. But we walk by faith, not by sight. God calls us to trust Him and not ourselves. So sometimes in my life, I can feel like I'm frustrated because I'm not in the right space. I'm not at the right location with the right people. I feel like I'm behind on my timing, whatever the case may be. Or I feel like I'm not prepared enough. It's not the right time yet. I want to cultivate that greenhouse perfect condition to bloom. And what's so cool is that in nature, those bushes in my backyard, they just bloom at the right time. It's not the perfect environment. I do not have a green thumb, but God is the gardener, and He brings those bushes to a full bloom at the right time, and they don't have to have the perfect environment. And that really does give me a lot of peace of mind. I don't know about you, but I don't have to have the perfect environment, the perfect set of life circumstances, the perfect situation for me to bloom fully spiritually. That God is in charge of making the flower bloom, and flowers are just wired to bloom. It's in them. They just naturally open. And so for me, it's really encouraging knowing I don't have to have the perfect situation, the perfect environment to bloom. I'm not in a greenhouse as a plant. I'm in the wild, I'm in nature, and things aren't always perfect in nature. There's some drought, there's some overwatering with flooding, but like those bushes in my backyard, they do bloom. And when they bloom, they're beautiful. And I know that it will be that way for you spiritually, just like it'll be that way for me. But I challenge you to have that paradigm shift that blooming isn't this culmination point that we're reaching to and striving for. It can be like an ebb and flow where we bloom and then God pulls us back, like the winter season, to prune us, to recharge us, to teach and fill into us, pour into us more. And then when the spring comes in our life again, we're ready to bloom again. And it can be like that. So don't feel like you're a loser or a failure or you can't do what God's calling you to do. Bloom where He has planted you. Be faithful with what He's entrusted to you in this season. Be obedient to what He's called you to do. But other than that, just realize that flowers don't strive to bloom. They just bloom. They just bloom. They're not toiling for it, at least from the outsider's perspective. It doesn't look like a struggle for them to bloom. And I hope this speaks to you. I know that there's a lot of points that I still need to just sit with, but it was so rich that I just had to share it with you. And know that God sees what you're doing in the little. And if He can entrust you with a little and you're faithful with a little, He can do that with much for you. But we go from glory to glory. We go level to level. God knows what we can handle, what we're ready for. But also don't feel like life has to be perfect for you to execute what God has called you to do. We're never going to feel like we have the perfect set of circumstances. We're never going to feel entirely prepared or qualified. God's just asking us to bloom, to obey what He's told us to do and to trust Him in the waiting, in the meantime. And know that when you bloom, that's when people start to pay attention. But the process is what's most important, because buds of flowers people don't pay attention to. They only stop and pay attention to the bloom. But the process is just as important, because that seed needs to take root in order for the flower to bloom. So get your roots down deep in the Lord and be established in Him. And like John 15 says, He's the vine, we're the branches. We can't bear fruit apart from Him. So there is no way that we can bloom apart from being connected to Jesus. But realize that Jesus doesn't expect you to be perfect. He doesn't expect your life to be perfect in order for Him to use you. If you look at the Bible, it's filled with story upon story of people who were not perfect, who didn't have perfect life circumstances. But despite all of that, God used them in powerful ways. We'll never be perfect. We serve the perfect God, the only one who ever was perfect, Jesus Christ. But just know that He knows you're a work in progress, as we all will be, until the day we go to heaven. And we're never going to be perfect on this side of heaven. So don't expect perfection from yourself. Don't expect perfection from your life, because there's always seems to be curveballs. That's life. But just be faithful with what He's called you to do. Obey what He's called you to do, and bloom where He has planted you. Hope this blessed you.